Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a preview of this game right here. This is Revenant. It is the next game set in the Voidfall universe by Mindclash Games, who is helping sponsor today's video, so a huge thank you to them. And it is designed by Alan Kirkby, and this is going to be available on Kickstarter. When this video goes up, the campaign has started, so definitely go and check it out if this sounds like a game that you're interested in. If you guys have never heard of Mindclash Games, they are known for games like Voidfall, as well as Tricarion and Anachrony, different games like that, and this one is a big one. So we're going to get right into this. If you guys are interested in seeing all about Revenant, then just keep on watching. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Also, hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. Be sure to check out the Revenant campaign over on Kickstarter if you guys are interested. And without further ado, let's get into this preview of Revenant, shall we? All right, so getting into an aim of the game as well as all of the components here in front of me, which I will mention right off the bat that this is a prototype and everything is subject to change. There has been even a few changes since this prototype was created, and they are continuously working on making this game better before the campaign. So yes, the aim of the game in Revenant is, like I said, it is set in the Voidfall universe, and players are going to be playing as a captain or an admiral and their two cadets. This is a competitive worker placement game with a little bit of like hidden influence and stuff, which you guys will see over here with some different houses and influence in those different houses. But the story is that each player, like I said, is going to be a captain. They're going to be coordinating defense for a fleeing starfleet and then also competing to gain influence with various houses that are also trying to survive the journey. So you're going to be going against this void-born kind of fleet that is going to be attacking you, and you're trying to defend yourself and also these different factions' ships in order to earn that influence, and then also to gain as many points with the factions or houses that have the most power still remaining on the board at the end of the game, which we'll get into all of that. But yes, that is going to be a little bit of an aim of the game. It is going to be played over 4 rounds, and then whatever player has the most victory points at the end of the game will be the winner of Revenant. And the majority of your points is going to be, like I said, through earning that influence and also making sure that the different houses that you have influence in also still have power, because at the end of the game, all of the different ships, they are going to be connected to a different house, and the amount of ships that are still on the board of these specific houses are going to be the multiplier for your influence in those houses. So for example, if I had, let's say, 7 influence with the yellow house, and that yellow house had 3 ships still on the board at the end of the game, I would have 7 times 3, so I would have 21 victory points in that one influence track. So you're going to be doing this with all of the different houses and trying to, have the most influence with those most influential or more powerful houses. So that's a big way to get victory points. You're also going to be adding different equipment to your frigate. You're also going to be adding different kind of training cards to your cadets, and you're going to be playing all these various cards that are going to get you victory points. You're also going to be getting victory points for remaining resources at the end. And then also you're going to be collecting hidden influence cards throughout the game, which are then going to go towards your influence for these different houses. So you could be showing that you are going towards one sort of influence in a house, but then secretly going for some more influence with another house hidden in those cards. So yes, that is a little bit of an aim of the game. I'm quickly going to go over all of these different components. I'm not going to go too much into depth with all of these because a lot of it I will explain in the how to play. I will say this is one of the bigger games that I've done a preview on, so I'm not going to go fully into an in-depth how to play. This is not a how to play video. This is more of a preview, so you guys can get a good feel if it's something that you want to back. So as for components here, you have the main board, which this is going to be kind of sectored off into 8 different sections. And then you're also going to have the middle section, which is going to have the Revenant ship, which is a very important part there. And then each of these different sectors are going to have various arc ships. They're also going to have fighters, They're going to have drop ships as well as the kind of villains, which are these void-born ships, as well as some of these, which are rifts. And then eventually you are going to have some more civilian ships added here that are going to add some power to those different houses, like I said. So each of these ships are going to be connected to one of those houses. And then as they are added to the board and taken away from the board, the house's power is going to shift up and down. So that is the main board here. You also have a few like planets on different sectors that you can go and visit and perform various actions. The arc ships are these ones here that have the 2 actions on them. These are going to be the ships that you're going to be placing your workers onto and then performing those different actions, because this is a worker placement game. And then you're also going to be placing your workers onto these smaller ships that then you're able to do various actions with as well. So that is the main board there. You have this board over here, which is going to go through all of the different steps of the game and all of the different phases. So you have that at the top. You also have the hyper jump token here, which is either going to be disabled or enabled. And that is going to be a very important thing that we'll talk about. You also have the tactics track, which whenever you defeat one of the void-born ships, you're going to go up on that tactics track, and you're going to have various things that will be looking towards the tactics tracks for. And then we have here all of the different resources. So you have the 4 main resources, which the blue is science, the purple is neutronium, the yellow is energy, and then the pink is materials. You also have some additional void-born ships here that will be added. You have these corruption tokens, which will be added to the ships out here. They will also be added onto your own frigate board here as well. And then you also have some damage tokens that will be added to the various ships. And then lastly, we have these absorbers, which are going to be added into the various sections on the board as well. So those are all of the different resources there. Next up, each player will start with some various cards here, the first being hidden agenda cards. So based off of the player that you're using, there are 4 different players that you can play as. I am currently playing as the commander, and this board actually has 2 sides, so each player gets to decide which side they want to use. And this is going to give you various special abilities and different things, kind of asymmetric abilities for each of the players. So like I said, I'm playing as the commander, so I would be given the 2 commander hidden agenda cards, and then I'm going to choose one and discard the other before the game starts. So we have those there, and these are going to be kind of personal objectives that you can reveal either any time in the 4th round, or you can reveal it at the end of the game. And then each player is going to draft one of these hidden influence cards, and that is going to be the first one that they put their token up on the influence track of. So I have the red, so my player is up once on the red track. We have this whole area here, which you guys will see some B-roll of, because I'm sure you can't see it in detail, but each player is going to have their own board here. Like I said, you have this here, which is going to be double-sided. I have the commander and I chose side A, and this is going to be where your captain track is. It's going to be where your 3 workers are going to be placed, and it has those various special abilities that you have for the board that you picked. And then you have your frigate board here, which is your spaceship that is going to be out on the board. I have my pink spaceship here. So that is going to be there. And then you have various spots for equipment cards. These are going to be things that you're going to be able to upgrade your frigate with. So you have 5 spaces there. And then you have all of these different spaces here that are going to be your bonus actions, as well as your resource storage. So there's a very interesting thing that happens on this board that I will tell you guys about later. But you also have these 2 cards here. You have the Void Residue card, and you also have the Discovery Data card. These are currently cards, but in the final product, they will be integrated into the board, so you won't have those 2 cards. But those you'll be placing things on, and then once it's full, you're going to discard those things and get some hidden influence. So you have that there. Speaking of hidden influence and just influence in general, you have the influence board over here. There are 7 different houses, and you're going to be going up on these different tracks. Each track does have some resources that you can collect for the first person to reach the 2, 5, and 8 spot. So each track is going to have a different resource that you collect. And then each house, like I said, is going to be fluctuating in the power. So each house is starting with 2 power on the board, but as their ships get removed and ships get added by players, that power is going to shift. So you have those there. And then over here we have a ton of different cards. I'm not sure you guys can see, but there are the other ships that were not added here that are over there. That is the main supply. And then players are going to have different ways to add those ships here. And then if they do get removed, they'll be put into that supply there. But you have the Revenant tiles here, damage tiles. So whenever the Revenant gets damaged to a point where it has more damage on it than it can hold, it will actually trigger one of these damage tiles and something bad's going to happen to all of the players. So those are the tiles there. You have 3 different types of cards that you can get into your hand and then eventually play into your frigate board or onto your frigate board, as well as put under your cadets. Or there's going to be support cards, which are going to be one-time use cards that you can play, and then you're going to put off to the side and you are going to get 1 victory point for them at the end of the game. So you have your equipment cards for your frigate board, you have your training cards to put towards your cadets, and then you also have your support cards, which are the one-time cards that I just said. So those are the 3 types of cards there. You have the hidden influence cards, which you'll be gaining throughout the game, that are going to stay hidden until the end of the game, and then those will be added to the influence in those various houses. And then lastly, we have the colony cards, which are only going to be revealed at the end in the 4th round. And then you have the sonar cards, which are going to be revealed in rounds 1, 2, and 3. So that is everything for the, oh, also there's additional planet cards as well, because those planet cards that are on the board right now will be refreshed in certain circumstances. So that is everything for the components in front of me, but without further ado, let's get into exactly how Revenant is played. Like I said, this is on the heavier side for my preview, so we're going to go quickly over the different phases of each round. Like I said, it'll be four rounds, and then we will finish up the video, so let's get into it. All right, so getting into an overview of how Revenant is played. This is going to be played over 4 rounds, like I said, and each of those 4 rounds is going to be played over 5 different phases. So you have the sonar phase, you have the action phase, you have the recall phase, the breach phase, and then the hyper jump phase. So those are the 5 different phases, starting with the sonar phase. This is not, or this doesn't happen in the first round, so it's skipped in the first round, but it will be activated for rounds 2, 3, and 4. 4 is going to be slightly different, and I'll get into that. Simply put, the sonar phase is a little bit of a reset phase, and 2 different things are going to happen depending on whether the hyper jump was resolved or not, which that's going to be the end of the round, but I will get into that. But if the hyper jump was resolved, basically what is going to happen is in that phase, someone would have picked one of the 2 sonar cards to discard. So you do have 2 sonar cards, and this is just showing the layout of the main board and basically where different things are going to spawn for that next round. So if the hyper jump is resolved, that player is going to decide which one of these 2 to discard. They might decide to discard one thing that's going to kind of hurt another player and help them. So there will be 1 sonar card available if the hyper jump was resolved. And basically you would look at that and you would put everything out on the board that it says. So new Voidborn ships would be put out, new planets, new rifts, as well as possibly some new civilian ships as well onto the board. And then you would deal out 2 new sonar cards for that next round. So that would be if the hyper jump was resolved. But if it wasn't, the 2 sonar cards would still be out. You would roll the sonar die for each of the 4 rifts, and then that would also determine where you'd place out some Voidborn ships as well. And then lastly, for the sonar phase, each player would then be able to draw a certain amount of cards depending on where they were on their captain track. So as you get higher, the more cards you can draw during this phase, and it is going to be any kind of mix of the improvement cards that you want. So those are the 3 types of cards that I was talking about before. You have your equipment cards, your training cards, as well as your support cards, and you're going to be able to draw a mix of any of those, and determined by your captain track. And then also I will mention now that you always have a hand limit of 8 cards. So if if you were to pick up more than 8, you'd have to discard. So that is everything. And then the only other thing for this phase is the fact that on the 4th round, like I said, instead of 2 sonar cards, you are going to have 2 colony cards. So these are going to be face up, and these are then going to determine kind of the final destination for the fleet. And this is actually going to allow you to up one of the house's powers. So somebody might want to trigger the hyper jump in order to discard one of these 2 to make sure that that house, the one that maybe they are trying to get more influence in, is the one that gets an additional power at the end of the game. Or you can also decide to discard both of them, which then no house gets that additional power. So these are the colony cards, and they are only going to be available during the 4th round. So that is everything for the sonar phase. Let's move into the next phase, which is the action phase. All right, so getting into the action phase. So like I said, each player is going to have 3 workers or 3 crew members. You have your captain, and then you also have your 2 cadets. Each player is going to have 3 turns. They're going to place out a worker. A few different things are going to happen. And then once each player has had those 3 turns, that is going to be the end of the action phase. So with the captain as well as the cadets, the actions that you perform with these specific workers are going to get better as you add different things. So for the cadets, you have the training cards, which each cadet can have 3 training cards, and those are going to switch up things when you use your cadets. It's going to trigger different things, so on and so forth. And then also for your captain, you have the captain track, which is going to allow your captain to get better with various things depending on the board that you have, and also depending on the side that you're on as you go up that captain track. So that is kind of the difference between the 2. But as for what you're going to be doing on your turn, you're going to be choosing a captain or a cadet. You're going to be placing it out onto a ship. So there are various different types of ships, and each of them are going to allow you to do something different. So I'll go over that after, but the basic thing is that you're going to be placing out your worker onto one of the ships. And then if that ship is connected to one of the houses, you will gain an influence in that house and you'll go up on that specific track. If you go onto your frigate, you will be able to draw a hidden influence card. And if you go onto the Revenant, you get to choose any one of the 7 houses to go up on that influence track. And then if you place your crew member onto a small ship, which that includes your frigate, so your own personal ship of your player color, it also includes the fighter ships as well as the drop ships. If it's any of those 3, you're going to be able to move that ship to an adjacent sector, either before you resolve the action or after. So if I decided that I wanted to go onto this drop ship, I could, before I resolved the action, move it to an adjacent sector. So I might actually decide to move it to this sector here. Then once you've decided if you wanted to move or not, if you did land on a small ship, then you would go into resolving the action. So let's go over what all of the different ships are going to do. All right, so starting with the fighter ships. So that is these ships right here, you will see in the B-roll, but these ships are going to allow you to damage one Voidborn ship in that specific sector. So if I decided to take one of my crewmates and put it onto this ship, this will then allow me to damage one of the 3 Voidborn ships that are in the sector that I'm in. So I'd be able to damage, let's say this one, and each Voidborn ship just needs 1 damage in order to be destroyed. So I'm going to take this Voidborn ship and it is going to be discarded. And getting rid of these Voidborn ships will then avoid in the breach phase these different ships that are in this sector getting damaged. So it is very important to get rid of these Voidborn ships as much as possible. The next type of ship is going to be a drop ship, which this is the type of ship here. And basically these ships are going to allow you to go onto these different planets, which there is a planet card on sector 2, 5, and 8. So I would place one of my crew members onto there, and then I would be able to land onto one of these planets. And then each of these planet cards are going to have 2 actions that you can choose from. One is going to actually be corrupted, which this is a good time for me to talk about corruption, because both ships out on the board as well as the different planets can give you corruption. So if you ever go onto a ship that is corrupted, you will gain corruption yourself. And then if you ever take the corrupted action at a planet, that is also going to give you corruption. So when you get corrupted, you do have to take a corruption token, and then you have to place it onto one of your different bonus actions. So you have 5 different bonus actions that can potentially get corrupted, and then each of these bonus actions are actually connected to 2 storage spots for resources. So if you do have to place a corrupted token on to your frigate board here, that actually makes it so you cannot perform that bonus action, and you cannot access or place any resources in those 2 spots. So it takes away the 2 spots for resources there. If you had any resources in those spots when you placed a corruption onto that spot, you can no longer access those resources until you get rid of the corruption. There's going to be various things that allow you to get rid of corruption from your board. So if there is a corruption there, you cannot take that bonus action. You cannot access those 2 slots or the resources that are there, if there are resources there, until you actually get rid of that corruption. So it's kind of limiting the bonus actions that you can perform, the more corruption that you get on your board, and it's also limiting your storage space and resources that you can use. So that is corruption. So on the planet here, there's going to be 2 spots. One is not corrupted, one is. And there's going to be 2 different actions that you can perform. So here, for example, one action is to gain 2 science. So that is the blue resource. And then this one down here, based off of the icon, I think is that you damage 2 ships, and then you also pick up 2 improvement cards. And that is the corrupted action. So that action does seem a little bit better, but you do in turn do have to get corrupted. And then additionally, the top action, so the not corrupted action, has a little mining icon. So if you do take this action, the mining icon will then trigger some various actions if you have any of those on your board. So if you had any training cards or any equipment that had that training icon, it kind of gives you more benefits and allows you to trigger those if you do take that action. So that is the planet card, and that is the drop ships. I will additionally say when landing onto a planet, you do get to gather a discovery cube. Each planet is going to have a discovery cube on it, and this is going to be added to your discovery data. And then whenever you get 3 discovery cubes, you will discard those off of your discovery data, and you'll be able to pick up 1 hidden influence card. And this does actually work the same as with your corruption. So whenever you get rid of a corruption, you're going to place that onto the void residue card. And whenever you have 3 of those corruptions on that card, you're going to discard those off the card. And then additionally, you're going to gain another hidden influence. Moving on to another type of ship, and that is your frigate. So that is your own ship that you actually can make better with these different equipment cards. So if you do decide to go onto your frigate, you're going to be able to choose between 3 different things, and then additionally you're going to be able to possibly get more things depending on the equipment cards that you have. So if I decided to take one of my crew members and place it onto my frigate, this is a small ship, so you can move it before or after resolving your action. But you can use this in 3 different ways. You can either use it as a fighter, so you can damage a void-born ship in the same sector. You can use it as a drop ship and land onto a planet and do all that. Or you could decide to place an absorber, which the absorbers I kind of explained but didn't fully explain. Basically what is going to happen is you are going to place an absorber in a sector. The absorber is first going to get you an energy. So whenever you place an absorber out, you do gain an energy. That's the main way to gain this resource. And then additionally, in the breach phase, when the voidborn ships are attacking, for every absorber that is in the same sector as a voidborn ship, it actually absorbs 1 of the damages. So in this sector here, you guys can see that there's 1 voidborn ship and there's 1 absorber. Basically, the absorber would take that 1 damage, so the ship that is in this sector would not gain that damage. So for every voidborn ship, if there's an absorber, that damage is gone. All right, so next up we have this big ship in the center. This is the Revenant, and basically there are 2 different spots that you can go to on the Revenant. So if I still had this worker over here, I could place it onto one of these 2 spots. The first spot is going to be allowing you to add ships to the board. So you are going to have to pay one of the 4 different resources, so the blue, purple, yellow, and pink. And then you're going to be able to choose one of the ships that are off the board in the main supply. This might be one of them that start off the board at the beginning of the game. It might be one of them that gets taken off the board throughout the game, but you can choose which one. It could be connected or it will be connected to one of the houses. So you're obviously going to want to choose one that you have a lot of influence in, and then you're going to add it to any one of the sectors on the board. Once you place that ship onto the board, you would then increase that house's power by 1. So the second action that you can perform on the Revenant is a pretty important one, and that is the hyper jump action. So if a player goes here, they will first have to pay 3 of the purple resource, which is the neutronium. So they'd have to pay 3 of those, and then they would actually activate the hyper jump. So they would flip over the hyper jump tile there, and that would mean that in the hyper jump phase, it would be resolved. And then additionally, that player would be able to look at the 2 sonar cards like I was talking about before and discard the one that they would want to discard and keep the one that they wanted to keep. And then additionally, that player would gain 2 discovery cubes, and they would add those to their discovery data card. All right, and lastly, for the different types of ships, we have the arc ships, which are going to be these main ships that are going to have 2 different actions that you can choose from. So if I decided to place one of my crew members onto a ship, firstly, the ship that I just placed on does have a corruption, so I would have to take a corrupted tile and place it onto one of my bonus actions on my board. But when I placed here, I'd be able to choose one of the 2 actions. So for example, here with this ship, I would get either 2 science, or I would be able to place 2 absorbers, and I would also gain the energy for them. So I could take 2 absorbers, I could place one here and one here, and then I would gain 2 energy. All of these arc ships are going to have various different types of actions, so I will kind of go over a few of them to give you guys some examples. A lot of them are going to be, get resources. This one here is pay 2 energy to get 4 of any resource. This one down here allows you to take a corruption off of your board. You would then place that onto your void residue card. And then it also allows you to pick up 3 of the improvement cards. This one down here allows you to play 2 improvement cards for 1 discount each. This here is spend 3 science to go up once on your captain track. Various different things like that. Some allow you to damage things and go up on the tactics track. All right, so that is everything for the arc ships and also everything for the various different types of ships that you can land on. So whatever you do on your main action, you're going to place out a crew member onto one of those ships. You're going to gain influence. You're going to move if it's a small ship, and then you're going to resolve that action. And then you're going to move on to your bonus action, which you have 6 different bonus actions on your frigate board here that you can decide to use. Like I said, if one of the bonus actions does have a corruption on it, you cannot take that action until that corruption is removed. But there is actually the first action here that allows you to remove corruption. So this is going to allow you to remove 2 corruption, whether that be on your frigate board or on one of these ships out on the main board. But you do have to spend 1 neutronium, so you do have to spend one of these purple resources, and you do have to discard a card from your hand, so one of the improvement cards that you have in your hand, and then you're going to be able to discard. So you can do this up to twice, so you do have to discard a neutronium and a card for each corruption that you take off. So that is the first action. Another one would be to gain a resource of your choice, go up on the tactics track once, play one of your improvement cards, which I will quickly add for the cards that you are playing down. There is going to be a resource cost. So for this here, this is the Tinkerer. It is one of the training cards, so I would be actually putting this underneath one of my cadets. This would have a resource cost of 2 energy and 1 science, but whatever action I was performing, if the house matched the house that is on this card, I would actually get a discount. So I would not have to pay the science, and I would only have to pay the 2 energy. Activate your special ability here, and then also if there's any other cards that you have that have this special ability action, those would also be triggered during this bonus action. And then the last one here is to be able to move your frigate ship up to twice. And when you do move it, you're not going to be doing the action of the frigate ship. You're simply just going to move it 2 sectors. So once you were finished with your bonus action, that would be the end of your turn. You would go on to the next player. That player would do their main action and their bonus action. Each player would do this 3 different times, and then once each player has placed out all of their 3 crew members, that'd be the end of the action phase. Moving on to the recall phase, this is probably the simplest of the phases. Basically, this is going to be you taking back your 3 crew members. So you would take them off of the ships that you've placed them on. You would place them back on the 3 spots here. Additionally, any ships that were placed onto planets, you would take them off of the planets so that those planets are available in the next round, which I will mention quickly that if a planet does have a ship on it, another ship cannot go to the planet. There can only be 1 ship per planet. And then lastly, looking at the tactics track, whatever player was highest on that would actually get to choose the first player for the next round. So moving into the breach phase. So this is going to be where the Voidborn is going to attack. So what is going to happen is starting with sector 1 and going all the way to sector 8, you are going to resolve each sector. So you're going to look at a sector and then count how many Voidborn ships are still in that sector. You are also going to see if there are any of these absorbers in that sector. So for example, if there were 1 absorber, there are 3 Voidborn ships. So absorber, that would take away 1 of the damage. So it'd be 3 minus 1. You'd have 2 damage inflicted on the ships. If there are more than 1 ship, whatever player has their frigate closest would then determine where the damage goes. But because there's only 1 ship here, the damage is going to go to this ship twice. Now, if a ship were to get excess damage, so for example, if there wasn't any absorbers in this section and there was 4 Voidborn ships, this ship would get 4 damage. It can only take 3 damage. That would actually take this arc ship off the board. And then that house that is connected to this arc ship would go down in power by 1. Any excess damage will actually be put towards the Revenant. And then if the Revenant ever takes on more damage than it has available, that is going to trigger one of the Revenant damage tiles. So there are going to be 5 different ones, and then each tile is going to have something bad happen to all players. So all players are kind of working towards the same thing, not having the Revenant get fully damaged because something bad's going to happen. So if that were to happen, you would discard all the damage off of the Revenant, and then you would resolve the first damage tile. So for example here, the first damage tile is all players would have to pay 3 energy. Once you had gone through and done all of these sectors, all of the absorbers that were on the map would be discarded at that point, and then you would move on to any corruption. So basically what is going to happen is if a rift is in the same sector as there are still Voidborn ships, you would have to add 1 corruption to one of the ships in that sector. And the player, again, with the nearest frigate would then be able to decide which one of the ships would be corrupted. So let's just say this one would be corrupted, and you'd place a corruption token on that ship. All right, so that is everything for the breach phase. You would go through all of the sectors doing damage. You'd then go through all of the sectors with rifts doing the corruption, and then you would move on to the last phase, which is the hyper jump. All right, so moving on to the last phase, which is the hyper jump phase. So if a player did take the action of triggering or enabling the hyper jump, you would move into this. If a player did not trigger it, you would actually just skip this phase and move on to the next round. But if the hyper jump tile is placed or on the activated side, you would perform this phase. You would first flip over the hyper jump token to the disabled side. You would remove all of the remaining Voidborn ships from the map. You would also remove all of the planets. And then looking at the tactics track and where each player is on that track, whatever players were on the 8 or above would actually gain a hidden influence card. And then any players that were on the 11 or higher would actually be able to go up on their house influence track of choice. And then lastly, the tactics track would actually be reset. So each player would look at their captain track, and based off of where they are, that would lower them down to a specific point. So if they were on the first spot, they would get lowered down all the way to 0. If they were all the way high at the top, they would get lowered down to 3. So the higher you were on your captain track, the less reset you would have to go on the tactics track. And that is everything for the hyperjump phase. You would then move into the next round, starting with the sonar phase, going into all of the other phases continuously for those 4 rounds until the end of the 4th round. And then you would go into some final scoring. All right, so for final scoring, like I said, a lot of it is going to be based off of the influence, but you'll first look at whatever colony card was left at the end. If there were 2 still and no one activated the hyperjump in the last round, if there were 2 available still, none of them would be activated and they would both just be discarded. If there was 1 available, that specific house, their power would go up by 1. But if there were no colony cards because the player that activated the hyperjump decided to discard both of them, nothing would happen in that situation. Again, you would look at the tactics track. Whatever players were 8 or above would gain a hidden influence card, and whichever players were at 11 or above would go up on one of the influence tracks. And then you would move into a few things. So every player would, if they hadn't revealed their hidden agenda during the 4th round at any time, they could reveal their hidden agenda card at this time. And basically what's going to happen with this is there's going to be 3 different things that you can get victory points for. The first thing is going to be on the side, and this is going to be that you get 6 victory points if you are able to get to the 5 or higher on 2 specific tracks. So on this card here, I would have to be at 5 or above on both red and the dark blue. And then there's going to be 2 other kind of objectives that you're going for that are also going to give you 6 victory points if you achieve those. And if I was able to get all 3 of those, I would get 18 victory points, 6 for each of those. Additionally, each player would then at the end reveal any of the hidden agenda cards that they had, and that would actually add to the influence they had on the tracks. And then looking at each of the house tracks and their power, you would then multiply the power of the house by how far you are on each of these tracks, as well as any hidden influence cards that you had, and gain the victory points for each of those different tracks. You additionally would get 2 victory points for each equipment card and training card that you had. You'd gain 1 victory point for every support card that you used throughout the game. Those were like the one-time ability cards. And then you'd also gain 1 victory point for each 4 resources you had left at the end of the game. And then lastly, you would get -2 victory points for every corruption tile that were still on your frigate board. And then after that, whatever player had the most victory points would be the winner of Revenant. All right, friends, so that's going to be everything for this preview of Revenant. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you for sticking around if this video is pretty long. This is a pretty big game. I believe they are saying it's about a 3.5 out of 5, which is like a medium heavy game. So I still do want to give you guys a lot of information about the game so you can get a better feel if it's something for you. So yeah, thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Also hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. A huge thank you to Mindclash Games for sponsoring today's video again. I appreciate it very, very much. I will have the link in the description box to the campaign if you guys want to go and check that out. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if Revenant sounds like something that you would enjoy and you're looking forward to. And yeah, I love you guys so, so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends.